Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Leadership Now with me, Dan Pontifrac. Today in our house, wow, Dr. Deborah Heiser. Deborah and I are going to chat a lot about mentoring. First, a quick bio, and then we'll get into some really cool line of questioning about one of my favorite topics these days. So Deborah is the founder and CEO of the Mentor Project, which brings experts to mentor students around the world for free. She is an applied development psychologist, a TEDx speaker, a Psychology Today contributor, and she specializes in midlife and beyond. I think I'm beyond, Deborah, by the way. Her research covers a wide range of topics related to aging, including depression identification, dementia, and frailty, with grants awarded from a host of different places, including NIA, NIH, plus Pfizer. She's a frequent and expert guest for syndicated and local talk radio shows. Deborah contends that our most precious natural resources are not coal, oil, or gas, but intellect, expertise, and skills. Deborah is a proponent of utilizing our world experts through mentorship, and she firmly believes that we were all built to give back. Coming out later in 2024 is a new book aptly titled The Mentor Project, published by Wiley. Deborah, so great to see you. Thanks for this. Let's just level set, first of all. The Mentor Project. That's three really cool words all put together, and it's a great world as well. So give us a bit about, well, what is the Mentor Project? First, let's start with what inspired you, and then kind of into that will be obviously its definition.
Sure. Well, thank you for that very kind introduction and for having me on. I'm super excited to be here. So let's see. It started because I'm an aging specialist and have been since the 90s, which doesn't that just go together naturally? Yeah. So what happened was I was studying, as you mentioned in the intro, all the things that none of us ever want to have in our lives: depression, frailty, and dementia, right? And someone came up to me and said, "Why are you bothering to study this? Are you just putting a Band-Aid on our future?" And I thought, wow, what do we have to look forward to? I had to really take a look inside and say, what in the world am I doing? And I said, now I want to find out what we have to look forward to. And so when I did that, I found out we really have a whole lot to look forward to. And the main thing is something that happens to us in midlife naturally, which is a emotional developmental milestone that we hit, which is called generativity. Mm-hmm. And generativity is just a fancy word for saying mentoring, volunteering, and philanthropy. We're sort of built to want to take all that information we have, all those boxes that we've checked, and then we want to put a bit of us out into the world so that we feel like we have a little bit of immortality that we live on through others. It's a legacy. And I decided to focus on mentoring and started to talk to people from grandmas to five-star generals about what mentoring means to them. And the Mentor Project formed because some really amazing people who've done a lot of things didn't have access to mentees. And so we decided to form the Mentor Project because Bill Cheswick, who is one of the fathers of the network firewall, couldn't find mentees, and he was feeling sort of useless. And if you have astronauts and people who patent how you use credit cards on the internet, and individuals have done amazing things and they can't find mentees, I thought there's something wrong and we need to fix it. So we started the Mentor Project, and we have more than 100 mentors who are people from, well-known artists to astronauts who give back for free. And I just found out yesterday, one of our mentees patented 68 or 66 times last year. I mean, come on, really? Most adults can't manage that. So what we've noticed is that when you put somebody who's really done something world-changing with a kid, magic happens, and it happens for free. No mentee anywhere around the world, and we're global, has to pay anything to get mentored by any one of our pretty cool mentors.
It's such not just a benevolent thing you're doing, but it's a scenario in which there's two beneficiaries. There's the mentee and the mentor. And so, well, I guess there's a third, which is society writ large. But let's look at mentee and mentor just for a second here. So tell me a bit about. So that's a great description of why and where you're at right now, and what the purpose and intent of the Mentor Project is. Tell me a bit about the humanity of this thing. So, on the benefits of the mentee and then the benefits as you see to the mentor, how would you define both of those?
So we all know the benefits of having a mentor. So that's been ingrained on us. Go find a mentor. But that's a
Mhm.
nameless, faceless individual, right? That some person we're like, I better go find a mentor, not someone that does something specific or a specific person. Our mentees, the benefit to them is that they get to see a future for themselves that
Mhm.
maybe they thought was once a dream, but only a dream. And then they can access it. So maybe they said to themselves, I have a really great knife idea, but I would never be able to launch that. I'm going to be working, in some very specific area now in the culinary world. Well, now this person can have a company. They can have a bunch of patents. They can change the world, the culinary world, instead of being a cog in the wheel of the culinary world. So mentees get launched in ways that they never could have before. The mentors, you talk to any mentor and they cry. It's so meaningful to them. My husband jokes and he says, you make every man cry. And it's because I talk to them and they tell me how much it means to them to give back. What knowing that they made a difference in lives, it makes everybody choke up. It's just that powerful because when you know you matter, it takes your whole view of yourself and shifts it up about 12 notches.
Well, we also seem to be entering into, I guess, a demographic shift where the Bureau of Labor Statistics (BLS) reports that basically by the end of this year, the cohort of workers that are aged 55 plus will have doubled since the year 2000. So it's something like 25% from 12 or 13% over about a 25-year period. So it seems that percentage of workers who are older, I'll just say, has grown, has swelled. And so if we have a greater cohort of potential mentors, how do you see that shaping society and organizations from an impact perspective of younger generations, of whether millennial, Gen Z, or Gen Alpha, in so much as we're probably at one of those really strange moments in history, which is there's such a divide between the "I need it now" culture to the wisdom and unbelievable expertise that sits at our fingertips with a cohort like that. So I was trying to ask you a question that's maybe too compounded, but it's, hey, we got a lot more coming in terms of the cohort size, and maybe even a lot more problems happening beneath us at the younger populations. So is this good? Is this not good? Tell me a bit about what you think from a stats perspective.
Look, it couldn't be better. We have a library of knowledge and intellect that's astounding right now. If you look at all the people 55 and older, if we don't throw those out, if we don't say go retire now
Yeah.
and we capture for the younger generations in the work, no one has to reinvent the wheel. You have this free learning library that's available with people who are like, let me give you everything I know. And what I've noticed and seen is that people have people saying, here, I have all of this valuable stuff, the most precious resource this company could ever want, which is my knowledge and everything I've learned in all the time I've been here. And then the younger people don't get access to it, the new people. So if we capture that, as you mentioned before, the grays, if we capture those folks
Mm.
and we can harness that and get that information to the newer people there, that can absolutely push that company and every company that's involved with having people in the 55 plus age range really move forward astronomically quickly because those resources weren't wasted.
Hmm. I
That's
want
my
to
take.
Yeah, well, so two segues here. I want to do a deep dive on legacy and generativity, but before that, I think we need to step back and sort of stay on this a little bit. I want to ask you about two things related, I suppose, to generativity, because that comes after what we need to talk about first, and that is sort of normal aging versus image. And when I get to that point, I'm thinking about myself selfishly. I'm like, wow, I turned 53 this year. And so I'm getting closer to 55. I'm getting closer to death than I was birth, obviously. But so what do we have to do societally so that image and aging are looked at in ways that are actually positive? Because I find at times there's this, oh gosh, put them out to pasture. Like they're just wrinkled and old and they're crying about what it was like in the 1980s and bring back Wham and Prince, right? Like, so how do we have to kind of figure about image versus aging and the differences there first?
Well, what's wrong with Wham and Prince, first
I
of
know,
all?
exactly, right? See?
But I teach a prejudice class, and the first thing I always ask people is, give me the first words that you can think of with older adults. And the words that they come up with are smelly, frail, walker, burden. There's never a nice word. And then I say, how many of you love your grandmas? And they're like, me. And I'm like, how many of those grandmas fit what you just said? And also, I say, this is your future. This is what, you are projecting as your future. So what happens is we all have a fear of growing older, and we're also labeling our future selves with really negative terms. So it's getting people to understand what really does exist in our future. And we have to change those words that we use every day when we say, oh, I got behind some old driver and they were driving so slow, is to change those everyday words and terms that we're using with regard to aging, and really acknowledge when there's something that's good and point that out instead of just the negatives. That's one thing. I will say also, just to get off on a tiny segue, that everyone should be going and checking to see what their own bias is with aging, and the Harvard Implicit Project exists.
Ah, yes.
There's one on aging, and I have the students take it every time. Every single person comes out as biased against aging. And I think that if we realize that we're biased against ourselves, it'll help us to change that and shift it and have a conversation in a different way. That's just my opinion on that. It's a big, complex issue.
Well, it also identifies, I suppose, or maybe it unpacks um, cultural differences. So I've done work with First Nations Indigenous groups, and there's a reverence that is provided to the elders. And whether that's through language or custom or the learnings that are transferred down time immemorial, they often say, this reverence, this prestige, this respect and trust that elders know, and they're going to help us find a new way by imparting advice, wisdom, counsel, etc., from the past to bridge the gap towards the future. And that's just one culture. Another is some Asian cultures, in China, in Japan, an absolute reverence, right, for elders. So there are certain, I'm sure in your research and the work you've done, you've seen certain communities that actually do respect and pay an incredible amount of homage to elders and their mentoring capabilities, whereas others do not. So let's tackle that one for a minute here, Deborah, and tell us what you think on that.
So you're absolutely right about that. And that when we look at aging and mentoring, which I do put those together because we're built to sort of give back once we hit a certain age.
Right.
Now, when you look at that, the cultures that really have it right, that mentoring is looked at as an apprenticeship. And we've lost that in the United States. We've lost sort of the civic engagement that we used to have, where there would be candy stripers, people learning how to do things or go out into the world. And there isn't as much of an apprenticeship model that's in the US. And so that's another thing to sort of get back to the idea of learning something as you would put the time and energy and effort into it, instead of saying, I'd like you to open a door for me. Now I'll have some success in 5 minutes, 1, 2, 3. But to look at a path that somebody's guiding you with as something that is valuable and matters and may take some time to learn it. That you don't open a can of wisdom and just, put it out there. You have to be able to absorb that wisdom within a certain amount of time too. You can't just be handed, a book on calculus and understand it in 3 minutes. I think that is kind of how I look at it, that we need to see mentorship as not a passing of the baton. And now you have it and it's done. That mentorship is 1, 2, 3, that it's really a way of life, that it is like we see in other cultures. It's a way of life that you are now seeking the consult of someone, and it's not going and knocking on the door and getting info for 5 minutes. You're really trying to understand what they are trying to impart to you.
So is that one of the learnings we can take from whether indigenous or some Asian cultures or other cultures you've studied, is that almost patience and the application, perhaps the better word, right? The systemic application of weaving it in, that sort of 1, 2, 3 mantra that you're getting at. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think the way I would sum it up is that we live in a fast food culture. Right? And we ingest stuff quickly. We may not enjoy it even, but we ingest it and we feel full. And we're trying to do that with wisdom. And we're trying to do that with moving forward. And all I'm saying is that other cultures don't do it in the same way. And I think that they've got it down a little better than we have it.
So moving from fast food culture to long meals.
Yeah, a nice dining experience, a Michelin meal.
There you go. Okay. All right. Well, let's come back to generativity. And so it's really important, I think, to sort of define. And if I were to sort of give it a go, and I'll ask you to top up or say, Dan, you're a weirdo, that's not what I would suggest. But I kind of think of it as a pro-social behavior ultimately, where and I say we, I don't just mean elderly folks or older folks like me, but you're kind of like establishing or guiding some form of next generation development. You're thinking about what you want to impart knowledge wise, behavior wise, theory wise, stories, right? So that it outlives you in essence. And I think this comes back to a bit of Erik Erikson's work to a degree. But tell me a bit how you would describe generativity before we tackle the topic itself a little deeper.
Sure. So generativity is where we're taking a piece of ourselves that matters to us, something that's important to us, and we're generating it outside of ourselves. We're pushing it out of ourselves into somebody else. I'll give you an example to make it a little more clear how we can define it between generosity and reciprocity, because most of us interact in reciprocity. So generativity is where you're taking something. I have wisdom in aging or in mentorship and whatever, and I'm now going to teach people that. I'm going to put that knowledge out there. So if I'm doing reciprocity, if I'm engaged in generativity, a piece of me is going to live on in somebody else. A quick example of that is Bob Lefkowitz created a legacy tree. Leave it to a 2013 Nobel laureate to do that, where he puts it in a peer-reviewed journal. Right. Somebody reads the journal, they go to a conference, and he says, I'm 6 degrees Lefkowitz. And he turns to the guy and he says, what do you mean? He says, oh yeah, 5 people ahead of me work, someone 5 degrees away from you, who was my mentor, worked with you. So he looked at the legacy tree and was able to see 5 levels above him, that person's mentor worked with Bob. So Bob said, oh, what are you doing? So the guy started talking about Bob's work, and it was, the guy started talking about his work, and it was everything Bob had done. And it just got moved out forward. That's generativity. A bit of Bob lives in this great grandchild of his, mentee grandchild in his work. Now, if you do reciprocity, that's a tit for a tat. Dan, I'll do something for you. You do something for me. We're good to go, and we're done. Generosity, which a lot of people mistake for generativity, is where you go to an ice cream shop and you say, I'd like an ice cream cone, please. And they say, okay. And they give you 2 scoops. You eat the ice cream cone. It's great while you have it. How generous of them. But once you eat it, it's gone. It's disappeared, and
Right.
it's never to be seen again. That's really, if you look at generativity, how it is different from the other ways that we interact with others.
And then how does that relate to legacy? Legacy, sorry. Is that well, when I turn 40, I start thinking about I'm on the other side of life, and I think you call it the right side of 40. So how does legacy and being on the right side of 40 relate to generativity?
It's a component of generativity. When you are generating something outside of yourself. So when Bob created his legacy tree, he also got to see whose legacy he was carrying forward, the people who were above him. And so he didn't start out of nowhere. None of us does. It's not like we pop out of a box and we are who we are. So we are built, though, to want to take all those boxes that we've checked all along the way and say, how did those have meaning? Did I ever matter? It's like A Wonderful Life, the movie. And the guy's like, oh, if I didn't, was never born, the world would be a better place. We need to know that the world is better because we lived in it, and that what we put out there is going to matter. So legacy is a huge component of generativity. And that's what fuels us. When I say we're built to do that, people want to make sure that their grandchildren have the things that the values that they have. If you go to it's as simple as if you go to a holiday meal, you can usually expect, if you live in a family, to have the same sort of meal at different holidays. And that's a comfort to you. And then that gets passed down. I have my grandmother's Thanksgiving recipe it's written in her handwriting that I make every year. Everyone expects it. Religion is passed down in this way. That's how it stays the same for centuries. Those are all legacy components. They're all things that we take for granted, but are important to us. It's not just our work. It's our internal values and meaning and things that we find important to us. So all of that is happening at midlife because we have the breathing room where, we're able to look and reflect, just because we have the time and space to do it.
Is there some irony, though, to that when we talk about fast food culture, meaning are we having to learn to pause a bit to kind of think about generativity? Is there some portion of people that are 40 plus that need some reminders about generativity and the fact that legacy is important? And I ask a little bit because when I think about, NBER research and others that suggest that really the stereotypes of young founders is actually debunked. Like the most number of founding companies that succeed are people who are 45 and above. And I'm thinking to myself, well, the societal stereotype is founders are 22 and they're all successful. In fact, no, successful companies are 45 and above. So do a 45 years old and above are more successful in founding their company? Meaning, I guess back to this question is there is the mentoring project and the work you do also a bit of a reminder to some people that, hey, you've got a lot to contribute. You should have the time in which to give back. Don't forget about legacy, generativity, etc.
I'll tell you, there's 2 things. Yes, there are people that need a little help along that way, that they're stagnant. Those are the people I coach and work with. And
there you go.
At any age, you can come out of that stage. I call that the Ebenezer effect. The Ebenezer effect is when you have a self-made guy who lives in a mansion, has everyone taking care of his needs.
Yeah.
And he should be happy, but he has no joy until he starts to give back. And then, his whole world changed. That's literally how it works when you work with people who are in the Ebenezer stage. So that is very clear. Now, with the Mentor Project, we were told, and because we were doing something very new, we're a mentor-focused organization, I was told it would never get beyond the 10 people that we originally started with. And I thought it was just going to be a fun little project. And Bill was driving his Tesla around in the tri-state area, meeting with kids, and he's like, I'm going to teach kids quantum mechanics in fourth grade,
Right.
yay. Everybody's having a blast, and the kids love him. They had Ches Day. It was amazing. We're running around, and then another person says, I want to mentor. We went from 10 to 60, and we then moved to 80 in a matter of months. People say, I need this. I've been waiting for this. So it's not like we need to remind anybody. We have a waiting list because there are so many people who want to do it. They just don't know where to go. You can't go to a park and say, hey, kid, can I mentor you? You'll be arrested. So it's that we don't have enough places that are appropriate for people to be able to give back. They do want.
I love that. The Ebenezer effect as well, and how it leads to a reminder, if not a definition of eudaimonia and what eudaimonia is all about. So it's phenomenal. How, Deborah, does lifelong learning play into this as well? Should we be teaching kids about themselves when they're 50, 60, 70? Should universities, should organizations be helping people see the benefits of in the relationship, I should say, between something like the mentoring project or just mentoring in general and the sort of notion of lifelong learning?
Yes, absolutely. We should be. I think that the one thing we should do is get back to civic engagement when kids are young. Those who are civically engaged, it's like working a muscle. You see the world outside of yourself. If you're kept in a silo where you're told succeed, 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 go up a ladder, you don't get to see beyond that. And civic engagement is simple as voting. It's getting involved in your community, houses of worship, or whatever. It used to be candy striping when I was a kid. Those sorts of things are really important because then you start to see it's very hard. You see people that are afraid to reach out to a mentor. They don't know how to interact with them. There's this, they'll say, I don't want to bother them. They must be too busy. I'm afraid. I feel vulnerable in talking about this. We remove that when there's civic engagement. When you're talking about lifelong learning, if we start with kids who are learning civic engagement early on, which is really a form of mentoring. It's like getting people ready to mentor. You're already primed to get involved in those kinds of relationships for the rest of your life. And that helps with lifelong learning. It helps you to continue to want to engage, learn about others, learn about other cultures, learn about ways people do things so that you don't get stuck in groupthink. It helps you to say, let me, consult with people around me in a different way. So that automatically does help with lifelong learning, I think, and is very
I love it. Yeah. And that covers off a huge cohort and component, and you're basically weaving in sort of systemic social purpose based thinking, which becomes a lifelong learning advocate. In the organizations of today, when you think about whether it's corporate, not-for-profit, public sector, should the chief learning officers and heads of HR, CEO, should they be thinking differently as well when it comes to this particular file?
Oh, absolutely. The way that mentoring is looked at a lot of places, which is that it's looked at as it's a box to check. We need to put mentoring in place. People need mentoring. Therefore, we'll put a matching system in, and we'll hope for the best. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to have said our mentoring program's not a success, but we need it, and we don't want to invest more money in it. And mentoring programs don't have to cost a dime, as we're showing here, right? But I think that if they look at mentoring as a way to get people to look to their left and look to their right, and look at lateral mentoring as an opportunity, that they will have explosive growth. It's one of the areas that I've coined the term because that is, if you look at tech, that's the most explosive growth. And if you look at tech companies, that's how they mentor. It's organic. They tend not to have the mentoring programs set up there because they're naturally doing that. So Bell Labs, the big organization that was a think tank that Bill Cheswick worked at, he was tasked with, they said, hey, do this, network firewall thing. And so he looked around, and when he hit a wall and couldn't do anymore, he went and asked a friend, how can you help me? And that friend is Steve Bellevin, who taught him what he knew, which was a different form of engineering. And then together then he was able to combine that. And then that problem was solved. Then they wrote the first book on network firewalls, and they're off to the races. Now, people take that for granted and they don't put it together that that's mentoring, but that is mentoring, and it's very powerful. So if companies can put together lateral mentoring where it feels like you're not going to a boss where you're going to say, I'm not telling him or her something, they won't give me a promotion, where you feel really vulnerable and you don't trust that you can open up that door. Well, you can if it's somebody from a different department or in your same department but same level. You're not competing for anything. That's where I can see a shift. It's free, it's easy to do, and we can make remarkable change in companies with explosive innovation.
I love that so much, and you and I are so aligned. One of the things I often talk about is not everyone is interested in vertical ambition, but everyone should be interested in horizontal ignition, which is your point about lateral mentoring. Like, how do I horizontally ignite others around me so that's part of the giving? And then, as you mentioned, that's both generous and can be reciprocal if we figure out a way in which to make that happen in a two-way approach, the mentee-mentor avenue. This has been so fab. We're going to do this again, that I am certain of. Tell us a bit, last question, what are you up to with the book, editing phase, writing phase, and tell us when it's coming out.
It's at like the feverish pitch right now, point where, it's, I think half of it's written and it's write, edit. There's an editor who's like right on top of it with me. We are working on the book cover. And by the end of March, it's supposed to be completely done and then ready to get it out. So it'll be out by fall. So I'm really excited about it. And I hope that it'll really help people to understand how mentoring can be used in a huge amount of ways that we haven't ever thought of it before.
Well, I can't wait, to read it. Just looking at the body of work that you've already put out there, and it's certainly in summary form about what the mentoring project, the mentor project will be all about. I mean, it is going to be one of those books and pieces of work where I think so many people, including those executives I talked about in organizations, are going to want to read to make sure that they're rethinking the way in which that they're putting mentoring into processes within the organizations themselves. So kudos. Where do we find more out about you, Deborah?
People can find me on Psychology Today. I'm a contributor there, the right side of 40. I have my own newsletter that goes out that is after 40. You can find me there. I have a website, deborahheiser.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm around. And the Mentor Project, obviously. Check out the mentorproject.org.
Amazing. Well, this has felt like I was the mentee and you were the mentor in this particular exchange today. Thank you so much for this, and I look forward to a future one. Deborah Heiser, everyone, and this has been another episode of Leadership Now. Thanks for listening and or watching. We'll see you next time.